The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dan started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to our Hawaiian Volcano Tracker. Today is Thursday, August 28th, 2025. I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont, and our ASL interpreters, Carrie and Daniel Kaufman, as usual. Mahalo, everyone, for joining us today. It's been a week since our last update, and as we expected, shortly after last week, we had episode 31 come on pretty quickly. So that's what we'll recap today. All the various sites you see here playing on the screen are some of the USGS captures of that really incredible episode that was inclined in its fountain, as you see here on the screen. So much more coming up on that. We'll take questions as usual, discuss what's happening with all the monitoring signals, look at time lapses, all that good stuff. How are you doing today, Dane? How's your week been?
Doing good, yeah. Just keeping our eye on things. We got some stuff about Pohoiki to discuss. We'll be showing some time lapses later and going into that and talking about what's going on in the community corner. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them at the end.
Right on. Thanks, Dane. So yeah, let's get to our summary. Yeah. Right. Let's get ourselves set up here. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for August 28th, 2025. Episode 31 of Kilauea's ongoing summit eruption began in full force around 2 p.m. last Friday, August 22nd, and lasted for over 12 hours. Although the fountains did not exceed 325 feet or 100 meters, that was largely because lava was shot out from the north vent in a near horizontal arc for over 1,000 feet or 300 meters, and would likely have exceeded 500 feet or 100 meters had it shot straight up, according to the USGS HVO. They report that roughly 8.5 million cubic meters of lava were erupted, and that covered over 75% of the crater floor, which is the third largest volume erupted in a full 8 months of activity so far. You guys are seeing a compilation of USGS clips of this incline fountain and of the new intermediate vent which opened between the south vent and north vents in the later stages of episode 31. Here you see it in the background once again. Those fountains reached about 100 feet or 30 meters in height. So there's the USGS clips, lava covering the crater floor. Here is the main V1 camera that most web observers had access to. And after we had that overnight spattering, lava came up, built an inner cone within the vent, and then directed the lava to shoot outwards laterally. And after 12 hours, receded once again. So we're looping back through here. From the V3 camera, looking across, here's a north vent with its fountain shooting up, the south vent oozing out, and then our intermediate vents popping up in between as well. And if we look at some wider views, here's a KW camera. I'm showing a vent on the right, lava flooding the crater floor, and once it gets dark, you can see the full extent of lava covering over 3/4 of the crater floor here. And from the reverse angle, the B1 camera, lava coming across from the west to east, across at about a 1 mile distance of the crater floor, wrapping all the way around. If we look at the ground tilt for this past episode, we had a few days of neutral inflation, deflation before a final rise, right before the onset of episode 31, which once again caused a deflation in the signals. Since then, we've been recovering, although we had a couple of days slowdown recently this week before resuming the recovery. According to the USGS HVO, minor glow is visible from the north vent, and patterns of seismic tremor continue every 5 to 8 minutes with low frequency bursts, indicating gas pistoning out of sight. And they note that altogether, forecasting models suggest the likely window begins late next week, the first week of September. However, if the rate slows, as happened recently, that will delay the onset. So longer term, here's a tilt for the full 8 months of eruption. You might notice that we're having longer pauses between our episodes and larger magnitudes of drops. So if we look more closely, the last two, especially pauses following episodes, have been some of the longest we've had for the full eruption. And we've had 3 episodes in a row with low fountain heights as well. But despite that, these last 3 episodes have had some of the largest volumes of any episode thus far in Eruption. Looks like the 3rd and 4th for the last 2 episodes here. Such that when you combine that with a slightly longer duration we've had here, our discharge rates, how much lava is coming out of the ground at once, is actually very similar to the high points we've reached over the last few months here. So that hasn't changed. It's just the nozzle and the shape of lava spraying out of the ground, as well as the pressure it's building to cause new cracks near the vent areas. Gas is still the main hazard for this eruption, with lava contained within a crater. We did have a big puff of gas shooting up into the atmosphere despite the low incline fountains, and it's captured here on our satellite image. Even between these main bursts of episodes, we have low-level degassing at 1,500 tons per day of sulfur dioxide, and here you see the current VOG forecast taking this gas southwest from Kilauea across South and Southwest Hawaii especially. And you can see that reflected in our current conditions noted here in the Citizen Science Monitoring Network of purple air. Looking at the earthquakes, it's been pretty quiet. A few shallow earthquakes beneath the summit, a few deeper earthquakes connected to the hotspot source, and a south flank continuing its slow activity as well. This is still in line with the background activity over the past 8 months, ever since the onset of this eruption in late 2024. And we're still seeing stretching of the caldera north and south with each episode. But that is only contained within the summit, as the east rift zone is showing contraction still, indicating no magma entering that part of the system. Lava is all contained within a summit crater of Kīlauea up within a national park in a summit region of Kilauea. Quickly on Mauna Loa, it's still at normal level and aviation color code green, which means monthly updates. Earthquake rates have been fairly slow still. This is the last month events under the summit. You see a few more events clustering here. So we're still at low levels overall, looking at earthquakes per month for the last 5 years. We're nowhere near any of the build up to the 2022 eruption. But over the last few months, there has been a slight and slow increase in seismicity in that area, even as the distance across the summit crater continues to extend, sometimes a little more quickly, sometimes a little more slowly, while it continues to rise as well. So magma continues to fill Mauna Loa slowly. Someday we'll see further effects, but for now, all is well there as well. And that's our summary for this week. Right. So let's move from there to our volcanic hazard summary and show you guys all the gas, since that's what we're really worried about nowadays, is the gas and the tephra, and the tephra doesn't fly as far as the gas, so it's the gas to start here. And so what I have to start is this V3 camera. Let's just look at here. This is the daytime views since the eruption, showing where this gas during its pause phase is blowing, and you're seeing it consistently to the left side of the screen here. I'll play it again, showing it's mostly trade winds with an occasional variable regime here when you see the gas clouds rise a little more vertically here. So by and large, the gas has not been as impactful to the nearby areas. It's going to the closed area of the national park. But when it flies farther away, then it can impact other communities further downwind. Well, here's a view of this past week here, including the eruption from the K2 camera. This is at the summit site where the museum used to be at Uekahuna. And so you also see, for the most part, the VOG blowing further off to the right across the Kau Desert and closed areas of the park over here. But occasionally, as this last image was caught here this morning, you have a little bit more slack winds, and you can have this kind of building of the gas at lower concentrations, and it can be drifting around nearby areas in national park especially. So that's our K2 camera. let's move to the KP camera. This is the one that's on the side of Mauna Loa and looking to the south. So here's Kilauea's crater is all in there, and I can zoom it in if needed. But it's interesting to also see the low-level trade winds which come from that direction. You also have your upper levels, which can go in any direction there, or kind of we'll see them maybe shift a little bit here. So there's Kilauea. There's that bigger gas cloud, and some weather comes in. Here, let me slow this down. Slow this way down and play it again here. So there's a low level before the main fountaining phase output. And here comes a big gas cloud, and there it is. See some other clouds come and get in the way. And then despite it being nighttime, the cloud's clear. We can see the eruption glowing through, and that cloud at that point seemingly bent over, stuck in this lower atmosphere here. Let's see it one more time again. There's a higher stuff, seems to bend over. And we seem to see the top of it at all points here, even with that taller burst there. All right, so if we zoom further out, we can go all the way to Mauna Loa. And so this is a zoomed in view from Mauna Loa summit. What you're looking across here is this is a far wall of the summit crater. We're on the north side looking south. You can't see Kilauea itself. It's going to be down in here, or maybe it's more over here, somewhere in there. But you'll see the cloud come up and the glow from it from this angle as well. So there it is. Let's slow this down too. Slow it way down. And loop it so we can have a chance to see it before it flies by. There it is. Something like that was a shape I was able to outline. You see it glowing back there overnight until about 2 a.m. when eruption ends, and then everything turns dark. And come daytime, nothing else. So this viewpoint this vantage point is right around just below 14,000 feet. And so you see, look, it looks like the top of the cloud reaches above 14,000 feet. Maybe not a huge amount, but I'm a little bit above that. So despite the low fountain, there's your evidence that the gas is reaching the higher part of the atmosphere here. That's Mauna Loa. And we have a similar view from Mauna Kea. So let me just go ahead and slow it down right here. And as I do this, you can see that there was passing weather coming through in Mauna Kea. So we have obscured views part of the time here. But we do have Kilauea pop up there and glowing through the night there. So pretty amazingly clear view from Mauna Kea all the way to Kilauea there for parts of that eruption. So one last camera to show you guys here. Let's go back to the KP camera. And I'm just going to show you guys the daytime views of all week. So after that main burst, there's our low level. You can see the winds reversing a cloud movement here. At the upper levels, even as the lower level plume continues to blow across the desert there. So a little bit of variability, and you can see how the gas might disperse to multiple places with that pattern. But at least we have lower levels for now. So we rely as usual on VMAP, the VOG Measurement and Prediction Project from University of Hawaii, Manoa. And they put out all kinds of useful products here that you can get from their website here on the left. But I like to focus on a VOG forecast, which combines the weather patterns with the VOG output here. So here you can see the current prediction, largely impacting ocean view, Ka'u, maybe Pahala and Nalehu areas down here, but also a little bit of South Kona as well, and coming into Central Kona as well. That's SO2, which is the raw pollutant gas component, and then it reacts and becomes these sulfate aerosols, which can linger a little longer, especially in these further away areas. So there's the both layers of the forecast here. And as we can see, looking at our interactive maps, first from the state, this is looking at all different components of the air quality index here. And let's try to get them on screen here. So everything is in the green. You do see a few elevated values in the Kona area, as well as Pahala and Ocean View here, kind of everywhere in this graph. Looking at their other version of this map, the SO2 index, it's just going to give us colors rather than numbers, but everything looks in the green all the way across there too. all different ways of looking at how the air quality is around the island. So depending on your preference, you can try those state maps, or this one is a Purple Air, the citizen science monitoring network. And for example, I can come down to somewhere like Pahala and click on it. Tells us the air quality now and gives us a history over time here for the last, looks like maybe 2 days or so, maybe 3 days, and showing where it was in the yellow, where it was in the green. So you can see right now it's just barely on the edge of the yellow, but it's been in that realm for much of the last 24 hours, 48 hours, as that fog has blown through, even after several days here. I was looking earlier today at Kahuku station here near Ocean View. Right now it's showing 6. But once again, let's see if I can zoom this in so it's a little clearer for you guys to see. There, something like that. And so see, it's depending on which direction the wind is blowing, it can bring that gas right across a sensor or not. And this is taking a 10-minute average of the readings as well. So you can see how it can be very concentrated but variable from one moment to the next here over the last several days as well. Okay, so let's back out of here, the Purple Air, and show you guys the National Park website. And this was something that we saw last week was under construction. They were making some changes, and so now we get to see what the changes actually are. Let me make sure it's refreshed as much as possible. And so here we are. Here's our map. And what we have in addition is a little inset here for Kaloko Honokohau National Historical Park that's over in Kailua Kona. As well as, not on the bottom left here, we have another inset that has those 2 stations near Ocean View at Kahuku, but also the one at Honaunau Historical Park. And we'll not say the entire thing just to spare interpreters, perhaps, since we did not share this in advance here. But there it is, all spelled out, all the locations of the sensors all around a national park. Right now they're showing fairly low winds, pretty slow. And so when it happens, they draw a big cloud showing that the gases could collect in the near crater areas. Otherwise, they'll show a plume showing a direction where the gases are blowing on these maps as well. So that's pretty cool to see those updates on here. Not only that, you can come and switch it from the map to the satellite view, which I also like, since we like to show some of our other maps in satellite view too. And as before, we can click on the charts and get the last 24 hours of data, and everything is in the green. Except for here, Kahuku has a little spike of SO2 during the day, just like that variable graph we just saw. So that is our air quality plots from the ground. There's a couple more satellite views we can add in here. One that we like to look at is this windy.com view, SO2 layer. And here it is, showing our low-level emissions continuing to add mass to the SO2 cloud that's building here in the atmosphere. And over here you see the pulse from our recent episode 31. That, I'm not sure if you can see the direction of these arrows are flowing. This low-level wind is all kind of in that direction there. So that's where this came from and blew away, and that's where it's forecast to go. I did animation on this and sped it up so you guys could see what that might actually look like over the next few days for the SO2 blowing across, right? And so not the only ones. There's other areas that have volcanic sources, like Kamchatka, for example. And there are other cities, of course, that produce pollution too. But there you see where we sit on a global scale, how we're adding SO2, and it flies away sometimes, but sticks around our island sometimes as well. So finally, we'll come to the Mounts project. This is collecting all kinds of satellite data automatically. So here's our SO2 layers back to a couple days before the eruption. We just see the low-level activity picking up as these gray pixels on the map until the actual day of. and our satellite seems to have a limit to its scan. It only was able to scan that far, so we got the edge of the cloud pretty well in the north, but we were missing some amount of it that's down here off of the scan zone. That's why it looks a little funny, but you still catch enough of the picture to see that there was a big cloud and it flew off in this direction and was most concentrated earlier in the satellite snapshot, such that these higher concentrations are away from the island by this point when this capture was taken. So that was the 23rd at satellite time. And then since then, we've only had the low-level emissions once again, localized around Kilauea itself. So that's our satellite view of our hazards, the gas, and where the gas goes, a tephra can go as well. And have not heard any reports of tephra in people's areas or the park. Have you, Dane, for the last week? No.
Sorry, no, I have not seen those myself, right. But might be some.
Yeah, equally valid, because we do often have a lot of people sharing when it does happen. So we have a few people sharing now. Maybe it was limited in impact, perhaps. All right, so that's it. That is our hazard, and we'll do our visual observations and summary here before our midway break. So let's put that up on the board here. And I'm going to start off with a couple of posts from Tracker from the past. I'm going to spring this on you here, Dane, because there's this whole question of what are we calling this thing, right? I've seen this term like lava bow, lava arched, inclined fountain, lava rainbow. So what actually is it? So I thought I'd bring up a couple different versions of this here. So this one's back from April on Tracker. A rainbow with an actual lava fountain behind it. You can see there. Right, this post. That's one version of photographs we've seen before. Lava rainbows. If you do a search, you might come up with that. But that's not what we're talking about here. Here's a different one. Here is one from Moana Sukahara back in June. And this was shot from the lava glow causing this lava bow pattern, which is a lot of interesting here. Yeah. And if we look in the comments, people say, yeah, we've seen these kind of things before. Some people will call them globos. I thought that was maybe a sign of the past times there, but pretty cool. So that's a different version of this lava bow. If you actually go to photographers and talk about lava bows, this might be what you actually are talking or referring to, right? And of course, we have what just happened in episode 31, which is also, you can see here is a post from Tracker from just this past week. Lava bow shooting out sideways with lots of tephra and smoke, fume perhaps, and ash and tephra. But yeah, why not? Lava bow, right? So I just thought I would play with this a little bit to start what it was actually going on here and why there can be some confusion if you just call it lava bow, what you're actually talking about. There's these different versions of what's going on. So when we come to the USGS, here's what they write. Inclined fountains. So a little more boring, but there is probably their most specific term they could come up with here, right? I thought maybe a lava arch, something like that, or I don't know. But now we're just going to be adding to the confusion if we start adding new terms as well here. So give you a little review. That's what we're looking at as this, whatever you might call it there. We'll call it an inclined fountain along with the USGS for now. And so here they have a set of.
All right. Well, it looks like we have lost Philip. So let's go ahead and skip to a little something else then. Let's talk about Pohoiki. How about that? So maybe Phil will rejoin us here in a second. So on the Pohoiki side of things, we have a time lapse here of the last week over from our webcam that is positioned on the Red House. The Hale Ohana has been generous to host that for us. So we have the last week of dredge activity down there. Not really much going on down there, but there is some continued work you can see on the 21st. and we just, continuing to get ready for the next phase of this whole operation, which is going to be removing that berm using a crane and opening this up to the ocean, which is going to be pretty dramatic, and really, why we put this cam up there in the first place, is be able to capture this whole process, so you can still see some of the wave action out there, and a lot of water moving. And relevant in that, we've been following this project since the 2018 eruption. Next, we have just work days. So these are only the days that they've worked on the beach, worked on the dredge since the beginning, going back to June 9th. So going back to June 9th, we can see all this taking place, and the removal of all this material happens rather quickly. We're only 2 weeks in, and we're making progress rather aggressively. You see, we went with the original plans called for a rather narrow channel, and this would eventually be widened out. And we skip ahead because right now the construction is taking place all in June, and by the end of June we're basically ready at that point. But then the project got modified, so we fast forward to August. We got some of those waves that come through and change that berm, and then from there we start to see the construction reignite again, and I start removing more from this right side of the screen there, opening it up, also exposing that second bay hot pond. So this is all leading up to the September 2nd date. September 2nd or 3rd is the expected start of the removal of that berm. And as such, the county of Hawaii has decided to close the boat ramp area. There's already been no swimming down there, but that's been rather loosely enforced, we'll say. And now they're closing it down until October for this dredging operation to be able to work. And we were also told by good fellows that they are going to be working 7 days a week on this one once they breach that channel until they're done. So that's all what's going down on at Pohoiki. Next week and the week after look to be rather interesting. And with that, I think Philip is back. Go ahead and see about getting him back onto the stage. There you are. Welcome back.
Hey, so yeah, I'm here, but my browser crashed, and I need a few minutes to get all my stuff back together and lined up again.
All right, do your thing. I'm just going to talk here. If you notice, this photo that was released with the press release looks awfully similar to the webcam. That is the webcam. The county ended up putting it into the press release, which was cool. Just didn't mention that it was our footage, which, ends up happening out here. So yeah, we just paying attention to, this ongoing project, and it's supposed to be completed by November. And this webcam, though, we're going to keep operational until maybe next June, so to speak, just to get that long-term representation of what's happening down there and all the changes that happen once the crane leaves. Because we expect there to be a lot of loose material that ends up getting moved to USGS and their volcano watch today. Ended up briefly mentioning that. I wanted to see if I could bring something up. I found a little earlier. Let's see if I can drop this in here without much issue. So USGS, and we'll get to the volcano watch a little later, but they released this video alongside the volcano watch of the wave action and the impacts that it has on the coastline. And this is showing a rather old piece of the Puna coastline and how it's
blow it up.
So yeah. And how it's been eroding inside that area. And this is an ongoing process, but they also note that the boulders that have been washing into Pohoiki over the past few years are from this 3.5 mile wide lava delta as it slowly erodes. So this, if you go around to the Puna coastline, you will see a lot of these types of cliffs. This is a slow process to make these cliffs, but it starts with a large ocean entry like we saw in 2018. And then the water and the waves and the power of the ocean take care of the rest over time. Yeah. Go back and just show a little bit more of the time lapse of the work days there, because it really is a one-of-a-kind project. We haven't seen this before, and that's kind of why we wanted to take the time and document it as well as we could, because as far as we know, this type of a project has not been attempted, especially under these conditions. We saw some dredges taking place elsewhere, but they were always in calm water, not with one side of the Pacific Ocean in deep water exposed. And we know how powerful that ocean can get, especially during a south swell. So really interesting. We can see those waves coming up and over and changing it, and those waves are going to be back, and they're going to, this dredge is not supported. This is going to be left as you see it, so to speak. So we expect it to morph and change and hopefully stay open, longer than maybe initially expected, especially with the widening process that is being done here. That really does a lot for keeping this thing open, in my opinion. That punching out that additional area. So we'll see how it ends up developing. You want to head into community corner, and then we can come back to you after.
All right. So yeah, let's resume.
Okay.
Our observations and get to the midway break, and then while you do community corner, I'll line up the back half of my stuff.
All right.
Because I could only get so far.
Sounds good.
So, all right, let me put my screen back up on here, and we are doing the Kilauea observations. All right. And yeah, so here's a USGS photo dump that I had tried to zoom in on.
That is not a good sign. It looks like Phillips has crashed again. So let's go ahead and do community corner while we're here. Always something, All right. So for community corner this week, we have a few updates on things. First update is you can see all these alerts and conditions. None of these have changed. Still got some closures, still got some advisories. But we did have a new episode, and just wanted to highlight, you can get some amazing views from the inbounds areas in this photo, courtesy of Cody Yamaguchi, placed on Hawaii Tracker from episode 31. And that lava bow, as Philip was mentioning just a minute ago. So I did pull up this lava viewing areas map. It's one of the most frequent questions that we get asked is, where can we best see this eruption from? And we do call it the lava stadium because of all of these red areas that the national park highlights, and the trails and the viewing areas that are littered around those. So it's always possible to find a spot to get a good view. And left of here, where it ends is the end of the legal areas, and in there usually are restricted mainly due to the trade winds driving the eruptive plume out to the southwest. And you can see here some of the advisories that are posted around the park to show where the areas are. They're not big signs, so they're kind of subtle. So just pay attention to your surroundings and you'll be on the right track. New news is we saw last week as the entrance of the park had some construction going on. There were some detours in place. Those are resolved, and the park thanks everybody for their patience as the entrance is now open again. But there is some, more construction taking place. Welcome Center is at the Kilauea Military Camp, KMC, and here you can see a map of it. You essentially just enter the park and continue straight down until you get to the camp, on the military camp, which will be on the right, and then you can see the exterior of the new Welcome Center that has been moved over to there. Bring your own water is still in effect. No portable water in the park to refill with. They do have water for sale, bottled water, but we recommend bringing your own, and always be prepared up there. And the Highway 11 power pole, the Helco project to replace the power pole, still in effect. So you might run into delays or encounter some construction while you're en route to see one of these episodes potentially. Closures are still in effect across the park, mainly due to the dry conditions. But there is also the Kilauea restoration that is happening Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is on the western switchback, so there's multiple ways into Kilauea, but to do the full loop, it's recommended probably to do it on a Friday or on the weekend. And this is running through the end of September. Mauna Loa Road is closed as well due to the fire danger from the dry weather. So pedestrians and non-motorized vehicles are still allowed, but for vehicles, for your cars, not allowed right now. And open flames are prohibited, but propane and gas cooking stoves are allowed. And the Helena Poly Road closed as well, but open to pedestrians and bicyclists. So again, dry conditions out there. And if you want to stay informed, I know we did pretty well on that last episode, getting out the notifications early that the episode was beginning. And we do those through the hveri.org/subscribe. There are our volcano alerts that you can subscribe to over there. And you can see the address on the screen there. And we want to thank the Bye Grant Program for the funding for this program, as well as their support for other programs through the County Council for our digital resilience and youth development. We appreciate ongoing support and being able to keep this program going. All right, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. The likes, the subscriptions, the shares, all that stuff really does help. We appreciate all the supporters that are so inclined to give donations. We did have a donation come through earlier, but all of the views, all that stuff, it really does help. So if you are so inclined to donate, we do take super chats, but we also encourage people to go over to hveri.org/donate and make donations there. Did want to shout out Norm from Hawaii for their continued support. I appreciate that. And I think Phil's back. We will maybe try again. I might need to delay with something, and we'll see where we're at. Two crash on stream. Some things are always new.
Yeah, don't push that button again, right?
Yeah. It does not like it.
Yeah, so I'm still got a few more things to click.
Well, why don't I do Volcano Watch then?
Okay, sounds good.
So let me just get it up. And logged into the screen here. This is a continuation of one of the reports we did last week. And I need to get it on screen. Give me a second.
Appreciate everyone's patience there. Sorry about that. That's what you get with a live show.
And when things go wrong, they always go wrong bad. All right, so the volcano watch this week was about the cracks from the 2018 eruption on the lava delta. And what do they mean? We talked about last week how the Department of Land and Natural Resources put out a message with some rather strong wording and advisories against people going out onto the lava deltas and what the cracks forming near the coastline could mean. And here USGS weighs in on it and provides a little bit of clarity. The best way to show this, though, is using the 1960 eruption in Kapoho as an analog for 2018, because it really is the same area, similar type deltas. And when we go look at the 1960 coastline, it looks so much different than what the 2018 coastline looks like. Again, with that image I showed, let's see if I still have it up. This type of formation, these sea cliffs. So 1965, we have an aerial shot shown here, and we see where the shoreline essentially is. And by 1990, going over the same area, you can see the outline of the 1965 coastline and how much it has receded. But it wasn't even done by 1990s. I mean, you fast forward 30 years later, thereabouts to 2019, and we can see still further erosion along the coast. It's a long-term process, this thing. So even 60 plus years later, we're still seeing erosion on that coastline. So to see 2018 have these large cracks appearing out on the coast, part of the process. And they do mention that since no major collapse has ever been reported along the 1960 lava delta, the erosion likely occurred more gradually. Most lava deltas consist of a solid surface atop loose submarine debris known as, I'm going to need your help on this one, Phil. Hyoclastite. Oh, you're muted.
I can't read that. It's too small. But I believe hyaloclasite.
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 Hyaloclasite. The sedimentologists have fun sometimes, I swear.
We'll add it to the list of Dane's words here that are unnecessarily difficult to pronounce, right?
You had to throw that in like I care. No, I'm sorry.
Hyaloclastite. That's actually what it says. Or hyaloclastite. I got it wrong too.
Forms when molten fragments. So basically, these deltas, they aren't built on solid material. There's loose material underneath, and you can erode and then give way rather suddenly. And Phil's talked about this previously for the Pu'u'o eruption days. And here I just wanted to show these boulders that are on the edge of the Pohoiki beach, right on the northeastern edge. And this is the closest point to where the lava ended, as far as it encroached upon Pohoiki. But all these boulders have been deposited later. We saw the beach transformed from initially sand to more rocks to almost exclusively rocks along the coastline itself. So it's been an interesting process, and you can see that they put up a little orange fence to warn people against that crack that's right there. So eventually that'll fall. But I remember Kaimu days. Kaimu is a beach that was taken in the Pu'u'o eruption. And I used to bodyboard down there all the time. And we watched this take place over years. And big chunks would fall in and even change the way in which the waves moved into the bay. So a certain piece of rock would move, and it would make the surfing better or worse, essentially, from then on out. So we've seen this before, and we will see it again one day. And we'll continue to see 2018s over the next decades. All right, Phil. Are you?
All right. Yeah, so I'm just gonna put my, let's see if I can add my volcano watch on here. Place it here as we can transition. I just want to highlight one of the sentences in here, which is this one. That most of this retreat occurred in the first few decades after the eruption, the 1960 eruption in Delta, with the rate slowing thereafter. And in no place has the coastline receded past where it sat before the eruption. And that's just one interesting point there, right? So it is going to be retreating, but it's not going to happen forever. It's just the outer edge there that was added onto what we had there before, which is a little bit more stable, and now has been wrapped in this new lava. Right? So yeah, and yeah, we can try that again. Where did it go? The hyaloclastite, maybe. That can be our bonus word, right? Let's see who can type it into the
I was
chat.
not ready for that, running across that word mid-sentence.
All right, so let me try our observations again. Let me come back to our photos up here, and let's see if this stayed zoomed in. Okay, it did, so I don't have to push the button anymore, and hopefully that'll stop me from crashing. So, okay, there is some images from USGS of this inclined fountain. And you see it's oh, wrong button again there. It's shooting over. That some of the captions here talk about how the lava extended 300 meters or 1,000 feet laterally from the north vent, going eastwards towards the center of the crater. Something that has been seen before, both in Kilauea and Mauna, although I'm not sure that in either case that they lasted quite as long as this, because they were due to some collapse of the cone and some temporary obstruction that got wiggled out of the way. Whereas it seemed like we had that geometry for the whole episode of 31. And we'll see what happens for the next one. If it changes, it can change every single episode, of course. So yeah, there's a more zoomed out view, a closer in view. The geologist hiking across this new field of tephra now. You can obviously imagine it's harder to get anywhere, and they spend a lot of time just getting from one place to the next, trying to do so safely without getting all that Pele's hair and tephra all in their clothing and breathing apparatus as well. Here is kind of the, not really the top of the fountain, but the end of the fountain, right? The far end of the fountain that's shooting inclined sideways is reaching around in here, and it's splashing down, and it's feeding this river of lava that's beneath where the fountain is landing, that feeds the rest of the flows into the crater there. See that as well. And here, all the massive gas rising from the eruption site. And you see that low fountain with all the gas going straight up despite the lava shooting sideways. And here you see below the fountain that track of that lava river that's happening below there. And this grayer material you see around the side, that's all the tephra that's falling down hard as a solid rock, and it's kind of crumbling and crushing other tephra. It's basically making rock dust, and that dust is what's getting entrained in the heat and swirling around and making these little vortex features, like little dust tornadoes, next to the fountain. Really amazing stuff. See some of that more in a video a little bit later. They note that winds were blowing from the trade wind, so most of the stuff was going off to the southwest. Yeah, even with that taller height there. Okay, and continuing in front of this dead tree, which is framing several of these photographs here. You see that there's the north vent and that inclined fountain shooting way over and feeding that river of lava just below it. There's USGS geologists doing perhaps some laser range finding or some other visual observation there. Pretty incredible job. And some more views. You see the sun starting to set. You see some different coloration of light here across the crater floor. But when the sun sets, then some of those colors become more vibrant. You can see here on the crater floor, part of the crater floor has had sunset already. You can see the lava shining through more brightly, and this far edge has not yet seen sunset. So you can't quite see the lava as well right here on the edge where it's flowing. You see it's hitting right across this dead tree as well. Note here, with each episode, the crater floor, more of the crater floor is covered. And in total, lava flows have filled over 260 feet or 80 meters of the crater with new lava. So that's the number that is being put forth, perhaps as an average representative number by the USGS. So there we have 260 feet of growth in the last 8 months of filling that entire really wide crater now. So that was the first set of photos that we got. There was a second set that came a few days later of the sampling at the summit for this episode. So here we see this inter-episode degassing and how we still have big gas clouds visible even just from the heat and inter-episode gas coming out. Passive outgassing plume, they're calling it there. And here you see the helicopter up there as they fly over, taking photographs of all the lava-covered parts of the crater. The helicopter is up here as well in that photograph too. There and there. And so they're taking photographs of the whole crater floor so they can make this three-dimensional map, and from that get a volume by subtracting the previous map they had made from the one they make this current time. The last I checked, the results are not yet published, so we'll have to check on that next week. But we can see the images here of their sampling and views from around a crater during the sampling. So this is an interesting view here. Clear weather on a morning of the 25th. You see that the wind is a little bit slack here in the morning time capture, and this cloud is kind of blowing over the center of the crater. It's kind of hanging there before the later winds likely blow it out of the way here. And then looking down, this is a little, I kind of wish I'd zoom this out, but I'm not going to risk the button. So I'm just going to let you imagine how this looks. The south of it, the north vent is down below over here. So somewhere in here, and lava was shooting sideways from it, but also oozing out in this river, right? So that's what this is looking at, is this river of lava that leads from the north vent away to this other part of the crater floor. And what you see here is these big piles of tephra and spatter now on both sides, extending a much greater distance into the crater floor. And you see as the lava cooled and it's hard to say, it kept moving and drained and degassed. You see that the shape of the tephra atop of this got all cracked up, and even though this was deposited only a few days before this photograph was taken, it's falling apart already from all the changes of volume below it. Really amazing stuff there. Thanks, Kendra Lynn, for that image. And for this one as well, which I'm gonna pull off here to the other side and show you this full view. So this is looking into the north vent. South vents back over here, and these intermediate vents we haven't talked about much are here in the middle here as well. But let me zoom way into the north vent itself and show you what that actually looks like right there, right? And what you can see is that the hole is coming out of the side of this western part of the hole. So it's not at the bottom, and you can see why we have this inclined fountain. And unless we collapse or open this in some other way, it looks like that's the shape that it is right now. You know, of course, once lava comes in and starts filling and pistoning and reshaping the nozzle, once again, that's when you can have also some of these changes. And we'll see some of that in just a couple minutes here when we look at the time lapse of this exact view right here. But before that, let's finish off these images here. So you can see them sampling, taking samples of the new lava on the floor of the crater. On the crater floor, there is a degassing cone is hidden back in here in the background. So they landed on the crater floor to collect samples. And all this is documented in this neat little movie that the USGS has put together. So I will not play the sound on this because I do not want to get us in any trouble with YouTube or any other of these platforms that we stream on, but I'll just talk over the USGS video that really is telling the story of a day in the field here of all the geologists walking out with all their equipment. This is really amazing. Let me pull that back a second there. Where's my view here? And you see this little vortex forming right in here on the side of this fountain. There it is right there. There's the USGS with gas masks on, rangefinders, zooming into the view of the fountain. So we just saw that hole is kind of sideways in there, and pressure is ramping up. You can see there's how it arced up and outwards. You can see their clothing blowing in the wind, those thermal winds coming up over the edge of the crater. And lots of fragmentation of the lava as it's coming out that inclined nozzle. And there it is, falling and feeding that river of lava. And that flows across the crater floor, starts spreading out, and reaching the far areas of the crater floor. Big, massive sheets. And here they are on top, collecting new rocks from their buckets, emptying them out. Getting dark there, you see more of the fragmentation, lava coming across the crater floor. And time to hike back with all your gear, all your samples, still wearing your gas mask, and finally pack your car. And here, pause this right here. There's a nice view of the intermediate vent right there in the middle. The south vent's actually over here. You see it's got a little ooze of lava coming out there, and it splits and goes that way. But in this view, most of this river of lava, little stream down here, is coming from this intermediate vent, which is actually slightly above both the north and the south vents you can see here. Interesting. This is an area that had a lot of lava piled on it. We've seen some cracks and somewhere around here, glowing cracks, and so we can see that there was heat coming out of there. And as pressure ramped up and lava first leaked out, first it started pistoning out of the north vent and spraying sideways. Then we saw the south vent come up and start oozing its lava as well. And then finally, the intermediate vent pops up and eventually builds up to 100 feet fountains as well. So yeah, keep playing it. And you see later on in the night, we're still having not as much volume coming out, but still arcuate fountains. This is a straight on view. So there's an intermediate vent in the background and the fountain shooting straight at us from the north vent, feeding this river of lava across the crater floor. And one more clip of the sampling helicopter still running on the crater floor in case they need to make a quick exit. And there you see the staff picking through some samples and getting all kinds of samples. Look like they're not only going for the right stuff, but as much of it as they can get in that bag so they can dig out olivines and those kind of things that can tell us the whole history of the magma up to that point. So really, really important work they're doing down there. And that's the little video they put out. So let me keep moving, try to speed it up here since I got slowed down by my crashes. But here are some of our time-lapse clips. So starting off with this V1 spattering at night. But if you look in here, in that first part, let's rewind that again. And watch right in there, you see this grow up, and maybe that's shaping the nozzle, the one that starts spraying out sideways, just like that. Let me put this on loop. This is something that I had put down slowly before my crash. Let's see it again there. They're growing on the backside. Well, it shifted on me. And here comes through the night. And here we go. Look right there. You can see this rim, this little cone growing inside the vent. And then when we start fountaining, it shoots out sideways. There's an arcuate fountain. There's that secondary flow from the north vent and intermediate vents, which you see here in the background, active once again. And then once dawn comes around, you see a little bit of glow still, and okay, now I've looped back around. So let me show you the V3 camera. Let's slow this one down too. All right, so there is our nighttime spattering. Some overflows came as early as 8:45 the previous night. There are some of our upper glowing cracks with lots of fume coming out. And here's our south vent, right? So here's our area that becomes intermediate vents. It looks like to me, something like that. And here comes our arcuate fountains, intermediate vents over here, flows coming across the bottom. Last gasp burst drapes the cone, and there is the end of the V3. Similar view to our S2 camera. I'll play that for you guys. I think the V3 is a little bit better resolution, but this one is nice because it doesn't zoom in and out, and you can always tell you're looking at the same thing. So one more view of that through the overflows at night to the arc fountain, and a lot of that dust blew to the south in the direction of this camera as well, so maybe you don't see quite as well from here either. So looking at the V2 camera, this is the one looking further across the crater from Volcano House area. And let's slow it down to. And we see the rising of the lava spilling over in the crater floor. Then a fountain comes kind of straight at this camera here, but all of that rock dust and rivers of lava. And then you see in the background the intermediate fountain vents come up. Okay, the thermal camera. Just a cool view. It's really nothing new. You see the overflows more clearly. The main outburst covering a lot of the crater floor, but as you'll notice, we're cut off on the side. Our camera isn't wide enough to see the far edge of the crater. So we have to go back to our visible to see what's really going on. But this is still running all through the week till today, and you can see that there's been no change. Nothing else has burst open or overturned or anything in the main part of the crater that we can see since the episode ended. So we go to the K2 camera first here. And so this was the actual view people might have had. Let's slow it down to where it'll just fly by. And so people can hang out and overlook down an area right through here and look in. And so the lava started coming out. You can see the dust rising up. You can see the top of the fountain from here. But you can't see the bottom, and you can actually see there's a lot of space at this overlook for much of this eruption, and looks like much of the gas blowing away from here with this area remaining open all through the night for those few lucky people who had it mostly to themselves. And we wind down, you can see before dawn, and gas continues to come out. So let's look at the reverse angle. I think I missed something here. Yeah, I missed one. Hold on a second. It is... Here we go. The KW camera. So same as our thermal view, we see the lava coming out on the right side here in the previous night. We see spattering throughout the day, all through the day of Thursday. We do our update last week. Then there it is on Friday. Starts shooting out. Here comes our sunset. You see lava coming across. We can see the whole crater floor now. Lava going all the way across, covers about 3/4 of it. You can see it's piling up thickest over here in this quadrant. And over here, if we look the following day, we actually can see an overturning event happens right there in that little corner right there. And it's harder to see at this speed, but we're still having settling at the cone and some of the lava flows in the center here. We see glow and even some small flows oozing out on the far edge of the crater, even as late as the 24th. And I'll let this run a little longer, all through the 24th as well. We don't see anything obvious in the daytime, but when it gets to be nighttime, you still see that there's still continuing glow and action happening with little flashes popping up, like new areas opening, and very, very tiny flows just leaking out locally in those areas. So yeah, that's the view from the KW camera, and now I can go to the B1 from the east side here. And so previous night. And this is a view that I like to show because this is what most people in the park are looking from the east side of the crater. You have a similar view to this. Nice cameras and binoculars can give you really close-up views, but otherwise you're seeing a pretty wide landscape with fountains and activity at the far side. There it comes. And the flow is coming towards you, towards the east side of the crater. So there's that height of the fountaining. Lava flows being fed by active vent. The vent shuts off. The flows keep moving through dawn. They're still oozing here, this area all through here, throughout the day, this next day. come nighttime, you'll see it still advancing over here, especially, and a few spots of glow further up. So that's really most of it. If I skip to the following night, once again, you can see on the east side some of these opening flashes of spots of lava. It's likely just cracking in the ground and exposing some of the interior. It causes this incandescent spot to appear, and it doesn't really move or go anywhere, but it just sits there and it cools off and it gradually dims. So that's our episode 31 views. And looking a little longer term, something we always like to do is look at these noon views. Let's have to loop this as well. So this is just the last 10 days or so. So you have about the same amount of time before and after the episode. And so let's start off looking at the far right side of the image here, right? So what you see is a stable ground before the episode occurs. Nothing is injecting anywhere beforehand. But then you see the ground level actually rise. That's the lava flowing all the way through here between one frame and the next. And you see it actually has reached all the way over and uncovered some of this land, including some of these cones from the September 2023's eruption site. And has expanded the flow field a little bit in this eastern corner. It hasn't quite got all the way to the edge, but it's getting pretty close there. You can see here. I'll pan it across. And there are some areas like all through here. It's easiest to look at to me like this big flatter gray zone all through here that has this white spot in the middle, a white spot right in there. But that whole zone is lifting up. It sits flat before the episode, and then it raises up. And this is different from what you see. You see lava flows actually appear here in the foreground. So this is not lava flows actually moving over top of the ground. This is the ground rising up because it's being injected from below. So you see it here. You see it through here as well. We actually can still see some of the gas coming out and pushed up. And you also see the new flow appear in the background right here, this darker black flow in this edge. And so really fascinating to note how it's injecting both below the crust and thickening it from above as well. You can see that obviously here. And on a KW camera, same exercise, one view per day at noon. You can see the continuing movement of the lava all through here, but I'm zoom it in, it'll be more obvious. You have sagging of this entire area that was ponded previously. Actually sags a little bit even before the episode begins. You see it sags a little bit and it keeps sagging. And we pan it over. I thought most interesting was this area right through here, where you can see the vent before and after. And most clearly, can you see these new wings of tephra, like the cinder cone, made these big ramps. Like lapels, one over there, and one over here. Like that whole thing from spring sideways. Look at all this tephra. There's tephra all the way over here in piles on top of the lava. And you see how it's sagging after the eruption is over, the episode is over, sagging, and the cracks will allow that movement to happen. You see the changes in the vent are all in the area down through here. Nothing really changes on the upslope. And if I pan it across, can't quite see the changes as well as we saw on the backside of the crater over there, but one thing I thought was cool to look at is the lava flowing across this northeast part of the crater wall. And you can look at where the lava line is before and after. Trying to do the before here. You can see how much it's rising up that far wall. This is really a zoomed out view. So that's a fair thickness that it's covering right there. Of course, it's uneven with every flow where it fills in the most, but that makes sense why we saw overturning from this area over here. So that's the wide view, and we'll maybe wrap up that episode 31 phase with that. And just point out that since then, what we've seen, this is the V3 camera at night, has been a little bit of glow at first that seemed to diminish and then shut all the way off, and has since come back a tiny bit. And that's really what we've seen since then. And coming to current, here is a V3 camera live. You can see the active degassing. It's not quite dark enough to see if there's anything glowing in there, but there's the V2. Is a V2? Is it going? There we go. There's a V2, a little bit fumed out. And last I checked, there was not a V1 live stream. Let's see here. This is a USGS YouTube page. There's a V3 live. There's a V2 live. But that's it. The V1 is currently probably under some kind of repair or something happened, tripped it offline. You can look at the static page and it is still there, still sending images, static images. And we can get the animations of those for the last 24 hours, for example, and see that there's been glow there. But no actual live V1 feed at present. And some other live views. KW looking a little bit more, I can't tell if it's the fog or the weather. There's some rain coming through the area as well, independent of the volcano. And thermal view. And from the far side, looking across, looks like the rain coming in from over here. All right, so that's our Kilauea observations. Let me keep it moving to our monitoring. Find the right button now. And start off by showing you our source being the Mounds project for some of the satellite imagery here. And the first one we'll pull out is Sentinel-2. This view that was captured
Well, the view that was captured, and we have lost Phil for a third time now. Dang, I should have lined something else up after that. Well, let's see, what do I got? Stand by 1 second. Weird to have this. There he is. He's back.
It's the hot something with my hotkey is not did not like that hotkey.
Yeah, no.
Forgive me. Like to flow a little better than that, but what can you do?
Yeah.
I found a new bug that I keep reproducing here. Thankfully, I don't have as much stuff to load up here. So let me get it going for us here. Right.
It's really interesting, though, all the different, them having the that webcam up for so long made us a little, expecting it to be up, and it having 3 of them and all that. It's been awesome just to have those going the whole time. All
right, so I'm gonna have to add things to this thing live as we go here, and maybe I can cut things as we go if we're dragging on too long here, but I'll give it a shot here. So Mounds project is our source. This here is the false color view, infrared view of the lava flows on the crater floor. So here is a full crater caldera of Kilauea summit caldera. And within it, there's this inner crater that we often call Halemaʻumaʻu, although it could refer to the whole thing as well too. And so you see that's why the flows are stopped along that far wall, but that's showing you the extent of lava on the crater floor from the vents up here, covering the whole crater floor. Let's see, maybe I can zoom it in without using a hotkey. Okay, there we go. That's what I need to do. So there's a view of that, right, from the satellite. We also have some INSAR images. So here's a capture 6 days from the 20th to the 26th. And what you're seeing here is this bullseye center of deflation right around in here at this brightest green. And you see this kind of concentric goes outwards all through there. And if you were to read this, it's basically showing that the reservoir that's feeding the eruption that depressurized is centered underneath here in mass. Okay, so what else? Interestingly, a few weeks ago or a month ago, we had a capture that was showing inflation in that same area as well. So it does seem to be it's not just a transient capture, but it seems like that might be where it's building up, right? Which is interesting. It's right in the center and on the eastern side of this collapse, similar to what we had in September 2023 eruptions, but offset from our current vents. So they must be catching some of these cracks and working their way through the cracks to the edge of the crater to erupt out over there. So, okay, let's look at some of our notices. We started off back on Monday. So, okay. Looking at our text updates, first sign of any spattering was back on Sunday night and mentioned in the Monday update. They noted strong glow and visible spattering then, but that's when we had a slowdown in inflation rate. So it took again until Thursday when we had our update last week for that again to show strong glow and spattering. And the next morning, they noted there were 3 sporadic precursory overflows that occurred at 8:46 p.m., 1:03 a.m., and 1:24 a.m. And continuing spatter bursts, jetting, and low fountains. And even before that episode begins, they note the building of an inner cone within a north vent there. Right? And this is adding to the previous update that on last week, Thursday, we talked about. They were warning of possible new injections and new cracks could open up because of the pressure demonstrated during episode 30 showed that we could do that and put out new fissures and new vents. So that was 9:46 a.m. And at 2:30, what's the time here? 2:16 p.m., they issue their volcanic activity notice paired with their aviation notice, showing that at 2:04 p.m. was when the vigorous part of the phase of the eruption began, basically marking the start of it there, right? And I'll keep it simple at that for there. And then likewise, when the activity ended at 2:52 a.m., they about 30 minutes later put out activity notice and aviation notice announcing the end of that phase. And also noting already at that early phase, a preliminary volume estimate of 8,400 or 8,400,000 cubic meters, 8.4 million cubic meters, erupted an average of 185 cubic meters per second during that phase, covering more than 75% of the crater floor. So they note the continuous action began back at 8:30 in the morning, and it was increasing until 11:45 when sustained overflows began, and then that takes till 2 o'clock to actually start vigorously founting. So it was a much longer, extended, delayed, drawn-out ramp-up phase, and ultimately, the point of this being that we'll get to this in a minute here. That despite the low fountains, there was a big amount of lava put out. This is the third highest total thus far in 8 months, and so activity notice and aviation notice paired together. And I thought I'd pull this out as well, that besides being in a caption, the USGS also has these occasional messages that they put out on their website and social media platforms. And one of these right here is what I was wanting to highlight. They note the fountains grew in size to over 100 meters, 325 feet, but they're coming out at a 45-degree angle and would be over 500 feet high if they were straight up. So that's just the source we're getting these numbers we're talking about. They're coming from the USGS, their messages, and their photo captions as well. So coming to today's text update, we're paused. Reinflation is underway. The likely window begins late next week at the earliest if there are not any other slowdowns. And currently we have minor glow, inter-episode degassing, and continuing seismic tremor that indicates gas pistoning with low frequency bursts every 5 to 8 minutes there. This has changed over time. Sometimes it's been as little as 2 to 4. It varies depending on the day, but they are occurring is the most important thing, rather than how frequently they are. It's still every few minutes, more or less. So there we sit. We just have to wait and sit to see. Likely during our update next week, we'll still be waiting, and we can pick it up at that point, how close we are and what needs to happen from there. For now, we can use that information and check in on the USGS timeline here as well. They've been updating their table with different fountain heights and volumes as well. Episode numbers are on the left here, so I'll just scroll down and show you that all the way down to 31, where we just recently got to. They still have to be determined for the volume, so we're still going to use a preliminary volume put out in that update to do some calculations. And okay, now I need to start dragging some of my other things in here. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one, which is our eruption episode volume. So on the left, we have Kilauea from this year, and on the right, I've got Pu'u'u from its first 3 years when it had its high fountaining phase. And so this is just raw volume over time. Right? So here we are, episode 31, put out 8.4. That's the third highest, with the only two higher ones being in the 2 of the first 3 episodes here that began this whole cascade of episodes. So the amount of lava coming out is as high as any point since the beginning. And for comparison, there were some climbs during the Pu'u'u phase where they had that in the middle as well. That's not what they saw towards the end, so it does not seem like we're following that same pattern from Pu'u'u. Just because we have nothing else to compare it to, we compare it to this. Whether it fits or doesn't fit, we say it fits or doesn't fit. So there's one comparison. Let's go to beyond looking just at volumes, the pause lengths. So here you can see our last 2 episodes, especially the one following 29 and following 30, right? It's the one before 30 and before 31, are 2 longest since our pre-17 pause as well, which also had a low fountain phase. But we actually, if you look, we've been climbing up, and especially over the last couple here, longer pauses between our events. And we did not see that really at the end of Pu'u'u either. We did see it at several points in the middle, having these little escalations. And so it seems like we're perhaps in one of these little phases. Okay, continuing. This was going to move faster, but I had to do it. This might be the 4th time now. Okay, here we go. Just discharge rates. So we saw the update say we're at 185 for 31. There it is at 185. Pretty similar to 30, and actually above 27, 28, and 29. And so it's interesting. These are our 3 lowest fountains, and they're actually, you can see that they're nowhere near the bottom of rates of lava coming out. So it's still very efficiently getting the lava out, right? And so we're still in this upward trend, essentially. You see Pu'u'u had an upward trend, eventually stabilized and turned around, come down, and that was before it ended. So we do not appear to be near the end there. Okay, let's see here. I think I might have got that out of order, but okay. Let's show you this one here. And so this is maybe what matters long term. What I have here is that same bar of volume for each episode with this little bar at the bottom. But these lines are showing adding all of them up over time, right? So what kind of matters here is the slope of this line is giving you like the average rate of eruption, right? And so what you can see is even though, and I have 2 lines here, red one and blue one, because we have 2 different sources of data, the maps and the text updates. And so there's a little bit of error. That's about the range of the error you see right in there, right? And what you can see here is that episode 29, 30, and 31 is this part of the line here. And you can see where the rate is as fast, if not faster, than what we had going on before. So despite the episodes coming less frequently, being more spaced out, they're putting out more lava and catching up, so to speak, so that the overall average is staying the same. We're doing the same amount of work. We're just kind of spacing it out a little more, which means we have to put out more lava each time. at higher volumes, higher rates, which is what you see here. This past one, higher rates. All that despite the fact that you have these low fountain heights and long pauses. So let's see here, 34, 36. This one was the other one I had lined up to show this. There's our fountain heights. So there's our 3 lowest ones, most recent ones being low. Yeah, we didn't really see something like this at Pu'uho'o, right? So this is kind of, once again, not quite holding up. And one last one to throw on here is this interesting measure of height, fountain height versus discharge rate. This is telling us something about the nature, like the character of the eruptions, right? And if you look at how this works out, fountain heights on this side, so our low fountains are all down here, and the fountains that are high are all at the top, right? So we haven't had high fountains since 28, really 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28 were that last burst of really high fountains. There's 27 back there. But then 29, 30, 31 are down here at low fountain heights. But discharge rate, you see they're actually at the high end, right? So they're similar to our episode 1, when the ground was really the most intact of any point during this whole episodic eruption, when lava had to build enough pressure to crack through it and burst out. And that's interesting because that's what we had to have happen once again with that intermediate event as well. So, okay, let me move on from there to our monitoring data graphs. So looking at how much lava passed over the laser rangefinder during its most recent episode 31, it looks like it's about 2 meters or so, maybe a little less, maybe one bigger flow and another smaller flow. And as we would expect from before, this might sag over time and cool down as it cools down and releases some of its gas. But you're looking at about, yeah, maybe a couple meters, so between 6 and 7 feet or so altogether of the lava. There's our recovery of inflation with our 2-day lull that occurred here midweek. Earthquake counts are still around background values. Nothing too interesting here. Okay, keep moving here. Past the earthquake map. And so last month, there's our most recent lava flow jump. A little bit more at the spot than our 1 meter we had during episode 30, but just luck of the draw where the lava happens to cover the crater floor. We had this interesting little lull before 31 came on, and then we had not only, let's get this zoom here, not only did we have this kind of rebound, but we had this extra sharp, steep inflation at the very end just before it as well. So that was another signal that we had when those fountains were becoming continuous and the tilt was still rising like this, that we were likely on the doorstep of the episode. So Sand Hill showing similar patterns there. Earthquake counts are not really showing me too much. You can see that there is pulses in the deep Pahala zone and pulses up at a shallower part of the south flank as well. Sometimes together, sometimes not. And there, so yeah, here's our last 2 episodes with this little bit more delayed onset of the episode right at the end when we're near the threshold there. So we will see. We would expect to have the similar longer recovery once again and delayed signal here, just like these 2. Okay. GPS at the summit. We'll probably go into GPS a little bit more next week. We're still seeing this spread across a crater, north and south, right? In fact, we have another one of these. Oh, I don't have it. You have it here. Week-long north component of the Uakahuna crater line there. But what's really important is that all that's happening at the summit. The ground is actually expanding and contracting, but not rising. It's kind of like an accordion in response to the lava injecting in there. Maybe it's using some of the old 2018 cracks, all that collapse structure, and it's able to accommodate the swelling and contracting for each episode. But all of that's localized at the summit, and here is a plot for the East Rift Zone at Pu'u'o, showing continued contraction, right? The distance here is going down over time from one side of the rift zone to the other in the Middle East Rift. So no magma going in there now. Someday that'll change, but all is looking good down there. Okay, that might be where we leave the monitoring data, to just touch on the earthquakes here real quick before we wrap up. And I will show you live. I'm always getting these pop-ups. Let's see, dare I risk this? I'm gonna have to risk zooming this out because, let's see here. Actually, just try this. All right, maybe that made me not crash. All right, let's try that. So I'll show you how I set this up. I like to go to the world imagery, to zoom it all the way out. You can see how many buttons it takes to click to get this map to show what you want. So I always have these little surveys coming up that I have to fill out for the USGS. They never work for me because I have way too many tabs open. But here's a live feedback of what you need to do if all you want to look at are earthquakes on a map, which is where I'm trying to get to right now. And there we go. Let's check we have the right time frame, which is this last week, okay? And we're currently coloring our earthquakes by depth. So we have down here in blues, the Pahala earthquake zone, where it's near the hotspot feeding through to the island, or through to the volcanoes. One branch to Kilauea, one to Mauna Loa, we suspect, and one to Lo'ihi, or it's a new name, Kamehua Kaimaloa, whichever you prefer. So let's, since we're down here in the settings, let's take out some of these deep events. So first, let's just show you guys further afield on the island. There's another deep event under Mauna Kea, all part of the settling background events further afield. So most of our densities over here in the southeast. Let's filter out these deeper events. And so a little bit of Mauna Loa flank, a little bit of Kilauea summit, and a little bit of Kilauea south flank is really all we have for the last week. Nothing super exciting there. And of the last week, the largest event was a 3.5 of the deep Pahala zone right there that occurred yesterday. Right, so I've had Mauna Loa lined up here. We're going to look at Mauna Loa more next week because the monthly update comes out then. So let's put up Mauna Loa's name for her to get her proper credit. There we go, Mauna Loa. So yeah, we're still at green, normal. The update comes out next week. But there's some interesting stuff going on here. We talked about last week how we saw daily variations in tilt, but we thought we saw maybe some background motion as well. So on a 1 week scale, we still don't see a whole lot. It seems it's not really, whatever's happening is not very fast. But now in a 1 month summit tilt, we're seeing beyond daily variations, this longer term cycle. And we're wondering, are there other tidal cycles or seasonal cycles that might be at play here? And it looks like there is something going on here, right? But now that we see that pattern too, it looks like even the baseline does seem to be rising a little bit. So I do think there is some kind of tilt from volcanic origin perhaps embedded in here. Hard to pick it out without some fancier filters than we have. But that's happening fairly passively. Earthquake rates are still very low. You see one event spiking this red line right here. But it's just one event at intermediate depth. Overall, it's nothing crazy with earthquakes at the surface. You can see that I'm looking at earthquakes per week. There have been times where we have more elevated earthquake rates. We've had a couple of lulls, but here we are kind of popping back up once again. And what's interesting is that some of these previous eras, like through here, the earthquakes were a little bit deeper, more dispersed, whereas now we seem to be they're a little bit more in a shallow part of the island and within the whole volcanic pile. So nothing really fast is happening. If you look on this graph for the last 5 years for earthquakes per month, you do see this very slow rise in earthquake rates. And it's also squished together. It's hard to tell here, but we had a little bit of a slowdown in there. And then this is a speed up back to normal, we'll call it over here. So nothing like what we saw previously, even post-eruption, pre-eruption, doesn't compare to any of that. But I'm talking about it because when you start looking at the GPS, we can see that the actual rate of stretching overall has been a lot higher in the last few months here when the sensors come back online than previously, when it was also expanding, but not nearly at the same speed. And in the past, we've seen these little wiggles where it seems to reverse, contract as signs of localized flank motion in Mauna Loa. So when that's starting to happen, Mauna Loa starts putting pressure on Kilauea too. And so maybe that's part of Kilauea's issue or having to change phases. Maybe it's feeling a little bit more stress from Mauna Loa pushing on it from the side as well. Kilauea, unlike Mauna Loa, that we're seeing Kilauea summit is stretching but not rising. Mauna Loa's is both stretching and it is also rising. So that is a magmatic source filling that really, really massive mountain. It's got a lot of area it can fill. So nothing to worry about yet. It's not shaking or quaking or gassing or any of that other stuff, but we do know it's alive and healthily refilling itself underground there. So we'll come back to this next week when we have a little more time to dig into it and we have a fresh monthly update. But something to keep on our radar a little bit more closely now than we have in the past, for most of the past 8 months, honestly. And yeah, I'll wrap it up with that, Dane. I'm kind of trudged through the end there with having to put things back as I went, but
Right.
made it.
Well, let's throw a couple questions at you and see how you do with those. I just got 2 here for you. First one's from Richard. Asks, will Mauna Loa increase its height 123 feet to become Hawaii's highest volcano?
That's a great question. That's like one of those betting lines we could put, and then with
just nobody will ever live to know if you're wrong or right. Like, how are you going to get paid on this one?
Well, so what I'd point out is there's the 1950 cone that straddles Mauna Loa's like northwest rim.
Uh-huh.
And it actually is from a fissure that intersected the crater wall and went above it. So like it actually started funding from above and piling up and like it kind of piled on from the crater rim above and also into the crater, both of them, right? It might have gotten 123 feet. So yeah, if you had something like that happen, you can build a little cinder cone on just the right spot. You could just in one pop do it, right? But then
take a height before it settles.
Yeah, before it settles, it's gonna like some ice and snow. Then maybe it doesn't last. I don't know. So I think if you were to look long term, yeah, they probably play this back and forth, right?
Right. And then Two Feathers asks, I remember maybe a year ago or more, you said, do you think that she could fill up the down drop area? And that time it was no. How about now?
Well, so very, very abstractly, the calculations that we've made is because you can see that long-term average rate of filling of the crater, right? If it keeps doing it at that rate, then maybe within another year of doing it, remember, we haven't gone a year yet, but
right.
Again, if it lasts twice as long as it has thus far, then maybe we could fill in that inner part, right? But that's a big if that lava can keep coming out of this spot only at the same efficiency and at the same average rate of filling.
Right.
So, yeah. Do I think she could fill up the down drop area? Yes. Yes, I do think so. Yeah. Before, I don't think it was a straight no, but it was probably not anytime soon. This is going to be coming out very fast. But what's really been fascinating long term is that we talk about many eruptions, like most of the Kilauea spatter eruptions before this one, they start with a very high eruption rate and then it drops off over time, right? But this one is having pauses instead and episodes in between, and on average it's basically kept it going. So that's really fascinating. Maybe tapped into an artery or into the heart of the thing here where we can really it's going to take a lot to shut it off probably.
Right. All right. Well, that's all I got for questions for today. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We will be back at 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time on Thursdays. That's our normal update. Unless something happens, another episode doesn't quite count, but we will be posting about it on Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. If you're not a part of that community, that is where everybody shares their information, shares a bunch of photos. It's really big community over there. So yeah, appreciate everybody for tuning in today.
Thank you, Carrie and Dano, for your patience with our issues today, and all of our viewers as well. And appreciate Dane and Lou on the back end. Lou is not with us physically today, but he still does work that helps us out. So appreciate him too. Hope you're having a good time out, good vacation though. All right. Hope you never get to hear that. Until next week, from our nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, for Dano and Carrie, for Dane DuPont, I'm geologist Philip Ong. Aloha, everybody.